Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar on keeping chickens, everything you need to know with a winter theme. I'm joined today, my name's Tracey, I'm one of the Dengi nutritionists, and I'm joined by Alison from the British Hen Welfare Trust and Sarah from Allen and Page Smallholder Range. And in this webinar, we're just going to cover some of the essentials on keeping chickens, especially in the winter months, as that's now where we're actually at. So with this session, if you have any questions, just because we're trying to keep this one a bit shorter and to an hour, if you could put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat box, and if you don't make yourself anonymous, then we will be able to come back to you and answer your questions at another time. So please feel free to ask plenty of questions, but we may not get through them all today. So to start off with proceedings, Alison's going to kick us off with her presentation. So Alison, if you'd like to start sharing your screen whilst I introduce you. So Alison has always had a passion for animals, and amazingly, she's been able to make a solid career out of it. In 2019, after 20 years of working a land-based college in their animal management centre, growing both the programme and the facility's physical footprint, Alison found her way to the British Hen Welfare Trust by volunteering for them. Noticing her outstanding talent and caring nature, they asked her to join them at Hen Central as their welfare centre officer. Alison can also be found pitching in on rehoming days, answering phones and organising volunteers, hens and adopters alike. And having done a webinar with Alison previously, I can tell you she is the fountain of all hen knowledge, so you are in for a treat. So Alison, if you could just unmute yourself, and if you can't, I can help you with that, and then we can make a start.
Okay, can you hear me, Tracey?
I can indeed. Thank you, Alison.
Okay, well, welcome to Devon, everybody. I'm sitting here in the Education and Welfare Centre at Hen Central. So welcome to Devon again. So just going to run through some of the things about sort of rehoming these ex-commercial hens. Then, as Tracey said, I'll talk a little bit about thinking about winter care for the hens, and also I'll just touch a little bit on the avian influenza situation. So, okay, so if I can, sorry, Tracey, my screen won't, I can't, there we go. So, oh, sorry, folks, here we go, technology, eh?
No problem.
Right. Right, okay, so I'm just going to run through a little bit about the charity and what the work we do, just in case there are a few people out there that haven't come across us before. So just a brief outline on what we actually do. Okay, so we're a charity and we rehome the commercial laying hens from the egg laying farms. Okay, we also raise hen welfare awareness. We try to educate consumers about the choices they make in the supermarket and how that impacts on hen welfare. We also very closely, we collaborate with the government and veterinary institutions to develop programs to improve welfare for commercial and domestic hens. Okay, and we really do encourage support for the British egg industry. We are staunch supporters for the British egg industry. Okay, the welfare in the UK is amongst the highest in the world, and our great British farmers are very willing to listen to consumer concerns on the welfare. So whole ethos really is based on positive campaigning, and this positive impact has helped the free range production grow, and now nearly half of all the British hens have access to outdoors, which is, you know, this is marvellous. Okay, so approximately 21 million hens in the colony cages in the UK. Commercial hens are sent to slaughter at approximately 72 weeks old, so about the 18-month mark. All right, they are considered to be past their peak laying production. Consumers usually, or not usually, sorry, largely unaware of hidden caged eggs in products of processed food. All right, so we ask people to look at the foods that they're buying. Are the free range eggs included in the ingredients, or are they the hidden caged eggs? Okay, free range eggs now represent 67% of the retail egg sales. So what do? So each year we save about 60,000 hens from slaughter. So up to date, we have in total, we have saved 858,336 hens from slaughter. We've got about 44 pop-up rehoming adoption sites nationwide. These adoption sites are manned by our volunteers. So we have a fantastic team of volunteers working all over the countryside. These are the people that are so willing to get up very early in the morning. They go to the farms to catch and collect the hens, take them to the rehoming site, and then they spend the day handing out these hens to the people who are adopting them. So can't manage without our fantastic volunteers. So always a good shout out for a thank you for them. Over 4,000 children have learned about hens and hen welfare through the education programs and the workshops that we also, we have volunteers running workshops as well. Okay, so I'm actually talking to you from the first Welfare and Education Centre. You see there, we broke ground in 2018. The building is finished. Unfortunately, we've had a little bit of problem with the COVID that came in just at the wrong time. So although we are using the building is in use. We're not quite full of capacity of what we want to do in the way of running courses, etc. The centre was funded by generous grants and donations from individuals, the corporate sponsors, and the trusts as well. Okay, so that was just, as I say, the first in the country. We are planning more over the years. So becoming a hen keeper. So what do you need to know? All right, so I'm just going to briefly go through a few things that is really good just to think about when you're planning your hen setup, etc. Okay, so things to consider: safe and secure environment. So you need to provide your hens with a safe, secure environment, somewhere they're going to live safely. As a hen keeper, it is your responsibility to ensure that your hens don't stray outside of your property. Okay, so not into the neighbours, through the hedge or out onto the road. So your responsibility. So you need to make sure that that environment that they're in is safe and secure for them to live in. Okay, also just thinking about your local predators, foxes, badgers, weasels, mink, etc. So even birds of prey in some areas. So thinking about how you're going to make an environment that's safe, it's secure, also a bit cozy for your hens as well. Okay, now thinking about space, but not too much too soon. Sometimes we go charging ahead, we want a huge amount of space for the hens, we've got lovely big runs, but just at first, when you're rehoming the ex-caged hens or the barn hens, we need to realise that these hens have never been outside before. So we want them to be able to step out into maybe a smaller run at first, so that they get used to the weather. They get used to knowing where their home is, where we're expecting them to lay their eggs, also where their food and water is, and where they can come back to a safe place. All right, so really important to get your hens homed before you start letting them free range around your garden. So a smaller space at first, but then maybe bigger space as time goes on. Now, they are likely to need some guidance with going to bed at night. So the first few days that you've got these hens, it is going to be very hands-on for you. So they're very naive when they come out from the farms. So, just showing them the first few evenings, right, this is where you need to go, this is where you go at bedtime. And just popping them through into the hen house if that's necessary. Some of them will pick it up really quite quickly. Others are a little bit slow off the mark. And just the other thing is that if you have a ramp that goes up to the door of your hen house, just be aware that the caged hens have never been up or down anything. All they've been used to is a flat mesh base to a cage. All right, there is sometimes, or there is, sorry, some low perching at about 4 or 5 inches for them to perch on. But other than that, they've never been up or down anything. So when you sort of put them in at first, just guide them up the ramp a few times. The first morning that you open the hen house to let them out, just be there beside them, just to be sure that they don't suddenly jump from the top of the ramp to the bottom, because if they land awkwardly, they are going to hurt their legs. Okay, so a bit of guidance with what they need to do the first few days is brilliant. So that would be fabulous. A little bit of TLC, a bit of understanding, and you're going to need a little bit of patience as well. Okay, the hens will soon start coming out on their own. They're going to start pecking around in their new surroundings. If they don't come out on the first morning, maybe it's too cold, maybe they're sitting there thinking, where the hell am I? All right, yesterday I was sat in a hot cage, and today I'm in sort of somewhere completely different. So just give them that little bit of time and patience, you know, to let them come out on their own to start with, let them settle in. Okay, try and spend as much time as you can with your new hens during the first few days, just to ensure that they settle in and that they do continue to eat. If you can pick the hens up and just give them a little cuddle, a little stroke down their necks, just so that they really do get used to you, pop them down again, let them walk away, just make that a really nice experience for them, so that if in the future you need to catch them, if you know, if they've sort of cut their foot or something and you need to get hold of them, they are used to you doing that and they're not going to be too stressed. Okay, now food and bedding. We ask that you feed your hens with the layers crumble when you first get them. This is mainly because this is the only type of food they've been used to at the farm. Okay, so we do ask that you keep them on there initially. If you want to swap them onto the layers pellets, then just do that gradually, just over some time. And we do ask that you put in a good layer of nice cozy bedding. So a nice chopped bedding, you know, would be really lovely for them, just to help them stay warm, especially seeing as we're coming into these cold winter months. Let's keep the girls warm. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about understanding the new pet hens. So the pecking order, this is a natural process that the hens go through when you first get them. They are just sorting themselves out into who is going to be the top bird and who isn't. Okay, so it can look a little bit rough initially. It can take up to 2 weeks for the hens to settle down with each other. So you've got to be brave enough, just stand back, let them get on with it. Obviously, if there's quite a lot of pecking going on, you might need to just intervene, clap your hands, rattle a bucket, just cause a distraction, okay? But it is a process that they do have to go through, so do try and let them get on with it. Vaccinations, hens are fully vaccinated at the farms, so that's all covered for you. Worming, we recommend that you worm 3 or 4 times a year. We recommend that you use a licensed hen wormer. And one of the things just to watch out on that is whether the wormer that you're using does have an egg withdrawal period while you're using the wormer and for maybe 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. So just be a little bit careful about that. Okay, creepy crawlies, so red mites, lice, external parasites. So just like your dogs and cats, we need to keep a lookout for any of the external parasites. Okay, red mites are usually the ones that cause the most hassle for the hen keepers because they're quite tenacious little things. So that is something that you need to, a bit like cats and dogs, is using your preventative treatment. So spraying the house every time you clean it out, spray inside the hen house, dusting your hens, etc. Okay, we've got lots of information on the website. So if you've got any questions with that, have a look on our website. And we do also have a hen helpline Mondays to Fridays as well. You can always give us a ring and we can chat through any problems that you've got. Okay. Treats, okay, what they want versus what they can have. We love giving our hens treats. The hens absolutely love having it. They will run around after you in the garden begging you for the treats. Just be a little bit careful. We would suggest maybe no more than about 5% of their daily intake of treats, just because, you know, you're giving them a really good nutritious diet with your layers, your crumble, your pellets. So you don't want to upset that balance. So don't go overboard on the treats. Also, if it's fattening treats, your hens will put on weight. it will lead to obesity, and the egg production may stop there. Okay. The great British weather. Well, when we have lovely sunny weather, the hens will love to be out in it sunbathing. If you've just had newly rehomed hens that maybe don't have too many feathers, just be aware if they're sunbathing that they don't stay out too long and get sunburnt. You can use, sun cream, suntan cream on them, just like you do for us. And also with the weather, the colder weather in the winter, there's a few things that we need to look out on that, and that's what I'm going to chat about shortly. So I'll come back to the weather. So laying behaviour, odd-looking eggs. Now, sometimes when the hens come out from the cage systems, they've been under artificial light for 16 hours a day. So they come out into the British countryside, and especially at this time of the year, we're into the short daylight hours. So the hens will come out, they may continue to lay eggs for a week or so. Then you might find that they actually slow down or even stop laying the eggs. Don't worry that you've done anything wrong. It's just that because of that change in the lighting, is that they are just adjusting their bodies into a more natural laying cycle. So they will start laying again, but it will be, happily, it will be something a little bit more natural, so a natural laying cycle for them. So don't worry about that sort of thing. Very often when the hens come out from the cage systems, they've got bare bottoms, okay, bare bottoms that are quite red, and these are to do with being in the cages. It's the heat from the cages, the hens possibly picking out the feathers of each other if they've got a little bit bored, they've got to find something to do. The bare bottoms look quite big because obviously if they've got no feathers on, it's quite pronounced. But with the exercise that the hens do get, once they come out into the run, they start pecking around, they're getting a little bit more exercise. Those bottoms will actually shrink down a little bit. Okay, so a lot of maybe accumulated fluid in them that will disappear once they start exercising, and once they've feathered up, you won't even know that they had a bare bottom to start with. The combs will be quite floppy and pale, and that's because they do dissipate the heat when the hens are in the cages. As soon as they come out into the daylight, a bit of sunshine on, a bit of weather there, the combs tend to stand up a little bit more, and they will become that lovely bright red colour that we expect from a laying hen. Okay, meeting other family members, dogs and cats, just be very careful that you introduce them very gently and very slowly, very quietly, and under supervision when you're first introducing them to each other. Okay, hens obviously never seen any other animals. It's a little bit could be a little bit unsettling for them, but it's amazing how quickly they will get used to your other family pets. So don't worry about that, that will be fine. Now, as you can see there, we've got the hen helpline, the phone number and the email address there. We are there, Mondays to Fridays, answering the phones. We can answer your emails. We'll get back to you and we can chat through any of the problems that you have. We're not vets. We cannot diagnose, but we could say, oh, that looks like it could be sauerkraut to me, and we could possibly give you a little bit of guidance. And that guidance might actually be, well, you actually need to phone your vet and speak to them. Okay, but we are here for backup if you need us. So moving on. Okay, so talk a little bit about the boys. We don't rehome cockerels. Okay, we're not a poultry sanctuary. We don't have the facilities to take cockerels on. Okay, but what we do have on the website is we do have a cockerel rehoming service where you can put a photograph of your cockerel, your contact details, and if anyone takes a fancy to him, they will contact you directly. Okay, so cockerels have got several roles in the flock. People very often phone up and ask us, should we have a cockerel? What are the pros and cons? Okay, so he's going to warn the hens about predators. He's going to help protect the girls as well. He's going to help the hens find some food. He will stop some bullying amongst the hens. So he will sort out any hens that are, having a bit of an argy-bargy. He's going to step in and do that. And obviously he is going to fertilize the eggs as well. Okay, Please be aware that if you have a hen that is laying eggs somewhere in the garden and you haven't spotted them, she might come out from under a bush one day with 5 or 6 little chicks in tow, all right? So if you find that your egg production is slowing down a little bit, do check around the garden, because you may have a hen that's gone a little bit broody and she's actually sitting on some of the eggs that he's fertilized, okay? There are hundreds of cockerels around the country at the moment because people have been doing hatching projects at home during the lockdowns that we've had. So they've been doing them at home to keep children entertained. People are now stuck because the, you know, obviously there's a 50% chance that the eggs that hatch are going to be cockerels. So just be aware that if you have got a cockerel, if you don't want any more hens, you do need to take those eggs away before they hatch. Otherwise, you are going to end up with several more cockerels, okay? And that's going to be a problem. Maybe your neighbours may, you know, may complain. So we do have an online shop where you can find everything you need for your hen. So there we go, Dengie fresh bed for chickens. This is one that we absolutely do recommend using. This is the one we use on our rehoming days for the hens. And obviously we also recommend the Allen and Page Smallholder range as well. So we've got those on the website as well. Okay, so there we go. So that's the end of just the PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to do. So I'm just going to just talk about a little bit about winter care for your hens. Okay, so just bear with me a second. There we go. I think I'm there. Okay, so we need to think about the hens in the winter, especially if you're rehoming hens from us. Currently, we've got several rehomings going on this weekend where the hens are coming out from the cages. We tend to rehome all through the winter. Obviously, we have to look at if we're in a lockdown or the hens are in lockdown, but at the moment we are going ahead with our rehomings. So we just need to take a little bit more thought onto the hens coming out from a temperature controlled environment into our back gardens. What do we maybe need to do and what to look for? Okay, so as I said before, the hens can be quite naive when they come out. So it is making sure that the hens are not standing outside in their run getting cold and wet. So if your hen looks cold and wet, then it certainly is. You maybe need to pick it up, pop it into the house, put it in somewhere warm so that you know, it can warm up a bit. Sorry, lost my track there. Okay, so inside the house we need to think about making sure we've got plenty of bedding on the floor the hen has. Make that really cozy. So, you know, these evenings, these nights when it's really cold, we're going to have frost and snow before we know it. A nice deep bedding, you know, will help them snuggle down and keep warm. Okay, if you've got any drafts in your hen house, maybe block them up with a little bit of straw, bit of paper, something like that. But please make sure that you're not blocking up the ventilation slots. It's really, really important that you that the ventilation circulates around the hen house all the time, even at nights when the hens are shut in there, because that does make it quite difficult, you know, for the breathing, the respiration, and that can cause problems for the health of your hens. Okay, now just talking about keeping the hens warm at night, if you've got a really large hen house with maybe not so many hens in it, what you could do is you could get a large cardboard box, put it on its side, put some bedding into it, and encourage the hens to go in there at night. So because the area around them will be much smaller, they'll be able to conserve their body heat a lot better in that small area. So once the hens have gone to bed, let them settle down, open the door, have a little peep in, make sure that each hen is settled in that box. If not, quietly pick her up, don't wake her up, pop her in with the others, and she'll stay warm till the next morning. Okay. If the weather gets really bad, or if you're in a part of the country where you're quite exposed and it's going to be really cold overnight, if you've got an outbuilding where you've maybe got a little bit of heat in there, maybe a heat lamp, a greenhouse heater, something like that, what you don't want to do is you don't want to heat the whole area. So you're not heating the area all you want to do is take the chill off it so the hens don't get cold. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Okay, so if we start looking on the outside of the house during the next few months, hens really don't like wet, muddy conditions. So if we can, it's a really good idea to lift them off that mud. So whether, so if you've got your run where it's not very good drainage, sorry, okay, you might be able to cut a little drainage channel out just to draw the water out and away from under the hen's feet. You might be able to put a really good deep layer down of hardwood chips that will lift the hens off the mud. They'll enjoy scratching through those anyway. Just please don't use the bark chippings. Okay, they do have spores on there that when it gets wet and moldy, it can interfere with the respiratory systems of the hens. So not the bark chips, but certainly the inside of the tree, so the hardwood chips are fine, and that will just lift the hens off the mud. Okay, you'll also find that with the hens in the winter, they will use the hen house a lot more for sheltering. So they're going to be going in and out all day with wet, muddy feet. They're going to bring that wetness in onto their bed. So you will find that probably every day you're going to need to lift the wet area up that's inside of the pop hole in the hen house. Don't leave that in there to go moldy and horrible. Also, because it's wet, it will actually create coldness within the hen house. So lift that out at the end of each day before the hens go to bed, put some fresh bedding down. They are really going to appreciate that, okay? Now, if you've got an area, maybe at the bottom of the ramp, so in front of the pop hole that they're going to go in, if you can't put wood chips down or something else down for the whole of the run, maybe just put it on that area in front of the hen house, in front of the pop hole. So as the hens are going into the hen house, they're not taking that mud with them, all right? And on that area, you can use a ground sanitizer, and that will also help just to prevent the mud getting a bit smelly and horrible, okay? Insulate the house on the outside, an old carpet, an old tarpaulin over the top, anything you can do like that. Again, don't block up the ventilation holes because they are really important, okay? If you've got your prevailing wind and rain comes down one side of the hen house, maybe put a tarpaulin or something along there just to stop that prevailing wind coming across their run and chilling them while they're out scratching around and pecking, okay? Whatever you do, make sure that you fix everything securely, because you don't want to be reclaiming your tarpaulin from the neighbour's garden, all right? So fix everything down as well as you possibly can. Okay, predators, all right? Cold, frost, snowy weather, you know, your predators are going to be hungry, they're going to be more determined. So do make sure that you are as predator safe as possible, all right? And the other thing is, during the winter, what sometimes we don't always think about is, because the ground is very wet and boggy, your fence posts might become a little bit loose, and that will give some ease for the fox or a badger or whatever to dig around that and get into your hens. So do please check your fencing around on a very regular basis, okay? Water, I'm not going to talk about feed because we've got Sarah coming along behind me. She's the expert. She's going to talk about feeding your hens over the winter, so I'm going to let her do that. But just a note on water for your hens, okay? Really important to ensure that your hens continue drinking well during the winter. If a hen stops drinking, she's going to stop eating as well, okay? One goes with the other. So in order to make sure that the hens get enough water, put your drinkers away at night, put them under cover so that they're not frozen the next morning, because it's going to take you a while to defrost those drinkers, and if you're rushing to get the hens done because you've got to rush to work, then that's going to waste your time. So put all your drinkers under cover at night. In the morning, get them out, top them up. Now, we really do strongly suggest that you give your hens a warm drink in the morning. So a nice, you know, top your drinker up with some really nice sort of tepid to warm water. Let the hens have a really good drink of that. And again, in the afternoon before they go to bed, offer them some more warm water, and that will really hydrate them, but it will also keep them eating at the same time. Okay, so keep that going all the time. Keep an eye on the health of your hens, keep a close eye on them over the winter months, take time to watch them eating, make sure they're drinking, keep your worming up to date. Okay, the last thing the hens need is a worm burden over the winter months. All right, they've got enough to contend with without, you know, worms causing problems. Keep an eye out for your your external parasites as well. They tend to lessen off during the winter months, but don't be completely fooled by that. And another thing, just another tip, is if you are spreading like your rock salt on your garden paths when it's frosty and snowy, so that you don't slip over, just be a little bit aware that if the hens have access to that, they might pick up some of that salt. They might think, well, this is different, quite fancy some of this. It can be actually quite unhealthy for them. Okay, so just making sure that they don't have access to that salt. Okay, right, avian influenza. So we are all aware at the moment that we've already had several outbreaks around the country. Currently, we are able to operate because we're not going into those surveillance zones. There's usually, I think it's a 10-mile surveillance zone around each outbreak. So because we are not operating within those zones, we are allowed and able to continue with our rehomings. Okay, we all need to abide by the government guidelines. So we all need to keep ourselves up to date on the current situation. Okay, there was another outbreak yesterday, I believe. So keeping an eye on what's happening in your area is really important. We need to look at our own biosecurity, the hen health, the hygiene, etc. For information, we have got lots of information on our website. So if you go onto our homepage, you'll see there's a link to all the up-to-date information that you need. So please look at that regularly. There's also there's DEFRA's interactive map on there, so you can see where that is in relation to the area that you are in as well. Okay, I can't answer individual questions on AI, but do have a look at that, and that will absolutely keep you up to date with what you need to do. And if we go into a housing order, which is what we had last winter, where you have to bring your hens under cover for a certain amount of time, and you do have to do that by law, we will have that up on our website as well, and that will give you some ideas about what to do, whether you can put a tarpaulin over your hen run, secure that, you know, secure it. That will prevent any of the droppings from wild birds flying overhead coming down through into your hens and then infecting your hens. Okay, please read the information that we have, because that will tell you everything that you need to know. Okay, right, okay, I will stop there. So thank you, everybody, and I will pass you back to Tracey. Okay.
Thank you ever so much, Alison. That was absolutely full of useful information, as always. Sarah, if I can ask you to start sharing your presentation, and I will introduce you whilst you're doing that, if that's okay. And don't forget to unmute yourself as well. So next up for our sessions is Sarah Day from the Smallholder Range at Allen and Page. Sarah has always had an interest and passion in the care of animals, which led her to study bioveterinary science at the University of Lincoln, which focused on small animals and equines. To further her understanding of farm animals, Sarah also studied a master's in animal science at Aberystwyth University, which had included her dissertation looking into the diet of laying hens, before joining the Smallholder Range as a nutritionist in 2013. Sarah is one of the friendly voices at the end of the Smallholder Range or Allen and Page feed line, and she's always there to give helpful information and advice to customers. So please do contact her if you need to. But in the meantime, I am going to hand over to Sarah.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Tracey. So hello to everyone. As Tracey said, my name is Sarah, and I'm one of the nutritionists for the Smallholder Range. So I just want to say thank you to Dengi and BHWT for inviting us to be part of this webinar. My colleague Sarah B has done one previously on feeding hens. So if you didn't see that one, I think that is available online, so you can always go back and have a look at that and get some information from that. The diets your hens are given, it is something that can be very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, but by providing them with the correct diet, we can ensure that the nutrients that they're getting will help to give them the health that they need, but also ensure any eggs that they are producing are of high quality. So just to introduce the smallholder range, if anyone hasn't heard of our feeds before, we are a family-owned company, and we have been a limited company since 1936. We have our own state-of-the-art mill in Norfolk where our feeds are made, and our aim with our range of feeds is to provide a diet that is high quality for owners who wish to keep their animals as naturally as possible. And these feeds are formulated for animals that are kept in a non-intensive or free-ranging situation, not necessarily in a commercial situation. Our mill is a drug-free mill, so that means there are no medications such as coccidiostats or antibiotics in our feeds, and we are Vegetarian Society approved, so no animal byproducts are part of our range. So our vitamins aren't coated in things like gelatin, and we don't add any preservatives to our feeds either. Our poultry range is soya-free, so in place of soya, we use field beans that are predominantly UK grown, and that helps to reduce the feed miles for them. The oils within our feeds are cold pressed, so the oil is extracted using pressure rather than chemicals, so again helps to make the feed more natural. And our feeds have added omega-3 oils from linseed. So omega-3 oils are not essentially only helpful for your birds, but they are also helping to provide additional omega-3s into the eggs that they produce as well. We are a non-GM company, so we use non-GM ingredients. And whilst you can't say anything is GM free, we take a further step in that we use hard IP ingredients, so hard identity preserved ingredients. This means that the seeds are non-GM and they are grown in an area away from other GM crops to reduce the risk of contamination as much as possible. So going on to what we want to talk about today, what are the main differences that you will see with your hens between summer and winter? Egg laying is closely linked to daylight length, so it may not necessarily considerably affect your ex-commercial hens, but your more traditional and rare breed hens will start to reduce the amount of eggs that they lay and may even stop laying completely through autumn and winter. Another change that you will see is your hens could go through a molt. So this is an annual process that normally happens between September and November. And again, in ex-commercial hens, you may not necessarily see a molt, but the annual loss of feathers is basically getting ready for the colder months. During winter, if you do have hens that continue to lay, you may notice that the yolk colour is paler for their yolks. This is because yolk colour is influenced by the carotenoids within their diet, and during the winter time, if they have a reduced access to grass or the grass isn't growing as much as it used to, this will have a bearing on the colour of those yolks and can make them a little bit lighter. So this leads on to a common question that we get from hen keepers as to whether they need to feed a different diet to their hens through winter. And quite simply, the answer is no. Your adult hens should be provided with a high quality layers feed, such as our natural free range layers pellets or crumble, all year round. Our layers feeds won't force egg production. They will support any egg production that will occur naturally from your birds. And it ensures that they get the nutrients that they need, as well as those for a strong eggshell and a golden yolk colour. If you do have hens that are laying through the winter, our natural free range layers pellets and crumble contain ingredients that provide natural pigments to support a lovely golden yolk colour. And these natural carotenoids come from grass, maize and marigold flowers. With hens that go through a molt, or if you newly rehome some hens, they may not necessarily have the plumage that we would expect to. They will need to regrow their feathers, and feathers are mainly made up of protein. So continuing on with our natural free-range layers, pellets or crumble during a molt, which both contain a good level of high-quality protein, will help with that feather regrowth. If you have had hens that have gone through a molt, or when you do rehome some hens, you may find that during that feather regrowth period, they stop laying. Main reason for this is that during that feather regrowth period, the protein and energy that would go forth for egg laying is used up for putting those feathers back on the birds. And then alongside egg production and feather regrowth, the birds themselves have daily requirements for a good level of calories, protein, and a balance of vitamins and minerals to maintain themselves. And the natural free-range layers, pellets, or the crumble will ensure that they're getting everything that they need through those winter months. And by ensuring that your hens are looking and feeling well through the winter, it does have the added benefit that you can find that this helps them return to laying quicker in the spring as well. So with regards to feeding, we want to provide free access to feed for our birds to ensure that they get as much as they need. An average sized hen will eat between 100 to 150 grams of feed a day, but that amount will vary dependent on factors such as temperature, egg production, and the activity level of the bird. So by giving them free access, you're ensuring that they get themselves at fill. In the colder winter months when the weather isn't that great, what you'll find is the days when they're not really wanting to be out and about, they won't eat as much as those cold, crisp, sunny days when they want to be out and about and need that fuel for exploring. If in the winter you're limiting the area your hens have access to, what can be helpful is providing a number of feeders and drinkers, just because that stops any squabbling around their feed, really. Particularly if, say, you have a hen who's a bit of a bully, by popping several drinkers and feeders out, she can't be around all of them, guarding them all at the same time. As Alison mentioned, placing a feeder somewhere that's nice and dry is ideal. It not only encourages your hens to come out into the fresh air, but it also helps to stop the food from spoiling. It isn't really ideal to pop the food inside the coop, even on the horrible wet days, because obviously then you're inviting vermin to kind of come into that building, really. And it would be beneficial if you can to pop the feed in a feeder to stop them from kind of chucking it around everywhere as another invitation for those vermin. And then of an evening, taking that feed out of their coop or their run and popping it somewhere overnight in an airtight lidded container, again, to stop those vermin from getting in. Alongside free access to feed, they don't need a lot else. The other two main constituents are grit and water. Grit plays a key role in digestion of your hen's food because it's not broken down by their teeth. Instead, the food is consumed whole, passes through the digestive system until it gets to the gizzard, and here the grit is used like a tiny millstone to break that food up into smaller pieces. Free access should be provided, and we recommend that this should be popped in a bowl alongside their feed, so in a separate bowl. Your hens will have a natural instinct of when they want to have that food and that grit, so they will go and help themselves as and when needed, so it won't go down as quick as your feed will. And if your hens do have some free range access, or access again in a run, they will have a bit of a scratch and a peck and pick up some small stones and pebbles themselves naturally. That extra bowl of grit is key in winter because if the ground is frozen or covered in snow, or again, we're having to limit how big of an area the birds have, that natural foraging and pecking will be limited. So giving them something else is ideal. An insoluble grit like a flint grit is an ideal grit for your hens. Some people like to use things like oyster shell, and the nice thing with an oyster shell as a grit is that it is another good source of calcium alongside their feed, so helping with things like eggshell quality. The slight disadvantage with a oyster shell grit is that it is soluble, so it will break down, so it isn't maybe as good as digestive aid as a flint grit could be. And then Alison briefly mentioned, so I'll go through it very quickly, but again, clean fresh water, ensuring your hens have got access to it, and making sure that we aren't, it's not freezing over if we have a cold snap. Treats, so like Alison said, these can be provided, but we recommend sparingly later in the afternoon or early evening. To give an idea, if you are feeding a mixed corn style treat, the maximum amount fed per bird should be 20 grams per day, which is similar to about an egg cupful. Feed and treats should not be mixed, as you run the risk of your hens choosing the treats over the feed, which can unbalance their diet and in the long run can impact egg production. With the early evenings that we get through the winter, if your hens have already put themselves off to bed, when you get home from work, it will be better to just feed a balanced layers feed in the week and save your treats for the weekend. Treats can also be used for behavioural enrichment, so treats like mixed corn can be scattered onto the ground within their run, which allows your birds the chance to exhibit that natural scratching and foraging behaviour. And these kinds of treats can also be helpful in kind of rounding up and encouraging your hens back in towards the coop of an evening, particularly when they are newly rehomed. Leafy greens, such as kale and spinach, both contain additional carotenoids which can help with yolk colour, and again could be scattered around the run to allow your hens chance to forage and peck for them. If our hens are confined to a smaller area due to poor weather, or if the worst does happen and we have another mandatory lockdown for our birds, we could use fresh vegetables as a boredom buster to help them exhibit that natural pecking behaviour in a positive way. So heads of broccoli, cauliflower, sprout stalks could be hung up in the run to give them something to peck at and to keep them occupied. But again, we will want to remove these from the run at night so we're not inviting that vermin in. Whilst not a treat as such, if you've got the flexibility to move your coop or even moving the fencing of the run, it may be beneficial to do this on a regular basis. Hens are fantastic at scratching over and churning up an area if they're left to their own devices. So providing them with a restricted area that's regularly moved ensures that you don't turn your whole garden into a mud bath in the wet weather, but also gives them the ability to have a fresh area of grass or earth to root around in as well. So quickly to summarise, what to feed for winter is incredibly simple for your hens. Continue to provide a high quality layers feed, such as the Smallholder Range's layers pellets or crumble. The protein level of 16% within this feed is enough for less intensely and potentially free-ranging birds to help support any egg production that happens or to support feather regrowth in both birds that have molted and those that have been newly rescued. The natural free-range layers, pellets and crumble both contain the same ingredients and the same nutrient levels. The basic difference between them is how the feed looks. For hens that are newly rehomed, the natural free-range layers crumble is ideal, as Alison mentioned, because it is a similar shape and consistency to the feed that they've been on before. Pellets and crumble are preferable to a mash. With mashes where you get the individual ingredients seen within there, you can sometimes get selective feeding where they choose certain ingredients. But at least with a pellet or a crumble, each beakful that the birds get is a fully balanced level and has a mix of the ingredients within it. We do provide the natural free-range layers, pellets and crumble in both 5 and 20 kilo sacks. As we don't add any preservatives to our feeds, the shelf life is shorter than seen in some other products. So by having different sizes, it means that there is an adequate size, whatever flock you have. Our feeds also do donate to the BHWT. So by feeding our feeds, you are giving back to the BHWT in the end as well. Treats can be used sparingly. So our super mixed corn and our mixed corn should be provided at a maximum of 20 grams per bird per day. And like I said, these could be scattered around the run to encourage scratching and pecking behaviour. The mixed corn contains a combination of wheat and maize, and the super mixed corn has a few added extras in there. So it has some peas, some limestone, which is a great natural source of calcium, and some grit as well. If you are feeding the super mixed corn as a treat, we would still recommend popping a bowl of grit out anyway. And finally, the use of leafy greens scattered in the run or the hanging of cauliflower or broccoli are great boredom busters to enrich the environment and keep them occupied. So all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for listening, and once again thanks to Dengi and BHWT for having us as part of the webinar.
That was great. Thanks ever so much, Sarah, for that one as well. So moving on to the last kind of session, I'm just going to start sharing my screen while I introduce myself. So as I say, I'm Tracey. I'm one of the equine nutritionists for Dengi. My love of chickens is only thwarted by the fact that I'm not allowed to keep any where I live. So I don't have any, although I do have names lined up for all of them when I'm in a place where I can actually get some. So in this last session, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dengi and Dengi fresh bed for chickens as well, because if you aren't into horses, then you may not have actually heard of Dengi. We are the UK's largest alfalfa grower and have been growing alfalfa for over 50 years. You may actually come across some alfalfa in certain chicken feeds or blocks, and again, it does actually result in a lovely golden yolk colour as well. Dengi started as a farmers cooperative, and many of the original members are now stakeholders as well. So we've got a huge wealth of experience between us. And we grow over 5,000 acres of alfalfa in Essex, plus 1,000 acres in Lincolnshire as well. In 2019, the Beta National Equestrian Survey found Dengi as the most popular brand of horse feed in the UK, maintaining our position from 2015. We're also exceptionally proud to have the Royal Warrant since 2007 as a mark of quality and service, supplying the Royal Studs at Sandringham and Balmoral. Sustainability is a big part of what we do, and across our products, our top 3 ingredients are 100% sourced from the UK, and our top 5 ingredients account for 97% of all the raw materials that we use. And this is something that we're really proud of. Alfalfa as a crop is also really useful from a sustainability perspective. And our Lincolnshire site has 40 years of data and on the estate, and cereal yields have only risen where alfalfa is part of the crop rotation. So it's a really good break crop for our farmers. And our farmers actually really care about the soil that they're growing in as well. And one of our growers was Soil Farmer of the Year in 2018, which was a national recognition for the work being done to protect and enhance soils. On to bedding specifically, back in 2011, the British Hen Welfare Trust challenged Dengi to develop a bedding that was cosy and comfortable for the ex-commercial hen, as well as being easy for the backyard chicken keeper. Dengi took up the challenge, and following product development and testing, Dengi Fresh Bed for Chickens was hatched. Product testing was not only carried out by some discerning hens from the British Hen Welfare Trust, but many chickens owned by friends and family of the Dengi team. I even tried some for my horse's bedding, but the only trouble was she really liked the smell of it and tried to dig it up and eat it as well, so that wasn't so successful. Here at Dengi, we are proud of the origins of Dengi Fresh Bed for Chickens, and as with our horse feed, try to use raw materials that are available from the UK and are sustainable where possible. Dengi's Fresh Bed for Chickens is made from a combination of dust extracted wheat straw with a pine oil coating. And here I'll tell you a little bit more about the ingredients and why we have chosen them. So starting off with the base of the product, wheat straw, that forms the basis or the largest ingredient in the Dengi Fresh Bed for Chickens. Wheat, as you're aware, is grown for human and animal consumption in the UK and is known as a co-product. This means that it's a really valuable commodity that comes out of another valuable commodity, which is great as this actually helps to reduce waste. We chose straw as the basis for Fresh Bed for Chickens, as firstly we considered it a warm and cosy bedding or substrate for the coop, which is important for ex-commercial hens who are less likely to perch. Researchers found that when given a choice of bedding types, hens like to spend time resting in bedding such as straw, whereas they prefer the active time in sand or dirt, especially for dust bathing. Another reason we chose wheat straw for Fresh Bed for Chickens was for the ease of disposal for the backyard hen keeper. Compared to other wood-based bedding options, straw rots down relatively quickly and is a valuable source of carbon or browns, as you may think of them, for the compost heap. A good compost relies on approximately a 50-50 mix of greens and browns to break down. And as an avid vegetable gardener and a family slightly obsessed with compost, I'm always up for taking the samples of fresh bed that if we take them for quality testing home to go on the compost heap when they're no longer required with my grass cuttings. If at times you're adding more straw to your compost heap and the compost heap seems quite dry, then adding some water can hasten the decomposition process a little bit more easily. The other raw materials in fresh bed for chickens is pine oil, and this gives the products its lovely fresh scent. Pine trees are grown for timber to make furniture, and byproducts such as bark are used to make paper. Paper makers don't want their paper to smell of pine oil, and so the aroma is extracted as an essential oil and used in fresh bed. Dengie chose pine oil for its fresh scent, which can be useful for keeping the coop smelling nicer, and for its natural antibacterial and antifungal properties. The pine oil biodegrades just as the pine tree would, and so is also suitable for use on your compost heap as well when your chickens have finished with it. With regards to the packaging, like many bedding companies, Dengi currently have to use plastic. Straw is very springy and needs a huge amount of pressure to contain it long enough to pack it. Plastic has many positives, and a packaging failure at the point of sale is the most unenvironmentally friendly scenario, as all the cost of making and delivering the product has gone into it, but without the benefit of using it. However, we are aware that people are wanting to move away from plastic, and we are reducing our use of and continuously considering alternatives to plastic as well. We have introduced a plastic that contains 30% recycled plastic, and we're looking to introduce a 50% recycled content when supplies allow. So you will see the maximum recycled content logo on our packaging. Other things that we are doing are including sourcing carbon neutral paper for product guides and information leaflets, and reducing the use of leaflets altogether, going digital. We also have links with Cool Earth, supporting farmers around the world, so look out for the logos on the packs as well. And we continue to support organisations like the Essex Wildlife Trust as well. So if you choose to buy Dengie Fresh Bed for Chickens, how do you use it? Well, to use Dengie Fresh Beds for Chickens, it's a really cosy substrate on the coop floor to collect droppings and urine, and a cosy deep bed in nest boxes to keep the hens warm and the eggs protected. It's really even useful when you're collecting your eggs to wipe and clean them on the straw if you need to. We recommend removing soiled wet bedding daily, so obviously picking up on what Alison said earlier, especially in the winter when they're going to get a bit wetter at the coop entrance. But giving it a good clean on a weekly or fortnightly basis, depending on how dirty your hens are. Fresh Bed for Chickens is available in a 50-litre bale, which is really nice and handy, or a bigger value for money 100-litre bale that will last you a bit longer. 5 hens will typically supply about 2 weeks from a 50-litre bale, whereas a 100-litre bale will be about 4 weeks, to give you a rough guide. Just store your Dengie Fresh Bed for Chickens in a nice kind of dry place in a bin to keep it fresh and ready for when your hens need it. So that was my whistle-stop tour of Dengie Fresh Bed for Chickens. I'm going to stop sharing, and then hopefully we might be able to get to a couple of the questions that you've actually asked as we're going along, especially for those that are in the chat box. Alison and Sarah, if you'd like to come back on video and unmute yourselves, because just looking at these questions, more of them are for you, I think, than me. I'm going to start with the ones in the chat box just quickly, because we won't be able to get back to those afterwards. So somebody asked, if the feathers are still pale, what can we do and what may be causing pale feathers? So I presume this is once the hen has settled in, if it's an ex-commercial hen. Any ideas, Alison?
Are we talking feathers or eggs here? Why I'm not sure why the feathers pale. Yeah. Okay, I mean, when the feathers grow, when they start growing, they will just come through, I believe, the same, you know, the colour that they should be. So not quite sure on that question. Not sure if Sarah can help me out on that one.
I'm not sure of that one either. I've not, it's a new question to me as well, really. I've not kind of seen or heard of anything like that before either. I'm not sure whether in some animals, you know, if there's been more kind of fur animals, if they've had an injury or a slight, sometimes the colour can change of the hair that comes through next. But that one is, yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, sorry whoever sent that question in. I just can't answer that one. Really don't know.
Sometimes
sorry.
we can't, and we might have the wrong idea about the question, so that's fine. Moving on to a different question. Somebody said that they currently have 4 fake grass patches in their garden divided by a pathway, and they're going to take the fake grass up and put some mud down. They just want to know, is fake grass harmful to hens? And then when the mud is there, it has concrete underneath it, approximately 2 inches depth. Is 2 inches of mud, I suppose, going to be enough for the hens to scratch around it? So number one, Alison, is fake grass okay?
Okay, yeah, there are some people that will use it. What I would be very careful about is, you know, the hens are going to be curious, they are going to be pecking at it. You know, because they do eat grass, as we've said earlier. So, you know, what I would worry about is if they are pecking at that artificial grass and it's actually coming loose and they are swallowing it, because it is made of plastic or, you know, something like that, isn't it? So I personally would be a little bit careful about using that. If they have the option of lifting it up and there's some mud underneath and it's 2 inches deep and then there's some concrete, the hens are actually going to much prefer to be digging around in that soil, that mud. Okay, there's going to be some worms in there and some other little creepy crawlies as well. So really and truly, the hens are going to get much more pleasure from, you know, from the muddy stuff. Okay, personally I would try and avoid the artificial grass if you possibly can. But yeah, okay.
Lovely, that's great. This one I think is for you, Sarah. Somebody's just asked, what does drug-free mean? Thought it was only added under a vet prescription.
So the drug-free side of things, there are, particularly say more in the commercial side, the baby chick crumbs, for example, the feeds that are provided to the chicks once they've hatched, in your commercial areas there is, and it sometimes can happen in less commercial, but it's mainly in your more commercial large volume hatcheries, you can get a parasite called coccidiosis, and so to help ensure the profit or the health of the birds as well in those commercial environments, there are things like coccidiostats that are added to hen feeds, mainly the chick feeds. So we don't do that. So vet prescription, you can add medications in. So flubenvet and flubendazole, the wormers, they are things that can be added into your feeds. But we don't add it ourselves. We don't add anything like that, any medications into the feeds from that point of view. So that's why we say we're drug free.
Yeah, excellent. There's another interesting one here for you as well, Sarah. A lady's asked, some of my older ex-commercial hens are nearly 6. Should I be feeding them layers pellets as they're no longer laying? And she says there's not much information on feeding veteran hens. No,
I mean, that's a fantastic age to have your hens. That's a brilliant time, and I hope you've had plenty of kind of life and memory with them in that regard. Whilst they may not be laying, the layers feeds or the layers pellets would still be providing them with a balanced diet. So it is something that it doesn't, you know, they're not fitting into the pigeonhole of being fed a layers feed, but it still would be a fantastic feed to continue providing them with the nutrients that they need now in their life instead.
Fantastic, thank you. We've just got time probably for a couple more questions. We'll give it a couple of minutes, and then there was actually, Alison, there's been more than one question with regards to worming. So how soon after rescue should you worm them, and what kind of worming regime should you use, basically?
Okay, so we say a couple of different things actually. If you're rehoming the ex-caged hens, okay, we would say let them settle in for 6 to 8 weeks and then start worming them. Okay, that's because they have been in the cages with the mesh bottoms. All the poo has fallen through, so they're not stomping around picking up worm eggs from each other's poo. Okay, so with the ex-cage hens, let them settle in 6 to 8 weeks, then worm them. With the barn and the free range hens, obviously they have had access to the floor where there is lots of other poo. So they will have been picking up worm eggs, etc. So we say let them settle in just for a couple of weeks, then worm them, all right? Now, obviously these hens are not wormed before they come out from the farms, because actually they would have been going for slaughter. So they won't have been wormed before they come out. And a lot of people do ask us that question, which is a very, it's a sensible question, but no, they're not wormed. So yeah, give them that time to settle in, then look at worming them. The wormers that we recommend, there's the two that are licensed for hens. One is flubenvet, one is flubendazole. Okay, so these are licensed, so tried and tested on hens. With those ones, you don't actually have that egg withdrawal period when you're using it or afterwards. But any of the other wormers that you might be using, you might get a different wormer from a vet or something off, online. Then you must make sure that you look at the egg withdrawal period, because those wormers have not been tested on hens. So to be sure that you're not getting that wormer, there will be that egg withdrawal period. Okay, so there's lots of different wormers that people use, but we tend to recommend the flubenvet and the flubendazole. Okay.
Just one last question then, Alison, because again, comes up multiple times, but given the likely situation that hens might be heading into lockdown, what can we do to stop hens bullying each other and things
okay
like that?
So a little bit like Sarah was saying, actually, with all the enrichment, we had lots of people last winter phoning us up saying, the hens are just, fighting amongst each other. They're so used to going out and free ranging around the garden. They've been in lockdown for 2 months. What do we do? So it's providing them with lots of enrichment. So it is things like hanging up, a cabbage leaf, a corn on the cob, half an apple, a pumpkin, half a pumpkin, a slice of pumpkin, anything that's in the shops at the moment. And like Sarah was saying, sprouts on a big long stalk, hang that up. Now, if you hang these things up at head height, as the hens are walking around looking for trouble, and who am I going to pick on next? They've got something swinging around in front of their heads. They're going to have a peck at that. Actually, they're going to get something quite nice and positive back from it. So they're going to get something yummy. So have things hanging up at head height, change them around every couple of days. How about a hen swing? Putting a swing in the run. Hens might take a little bit of time to get used to it. Hang it down quite low to start with. You can gradually lift the height from it. But hens, I've seen loads of hens having a wonderful time on a swing. Put some branches in. Let's have some perching in. They are perching animals. So let's get, in the corner of the run, let's have, a couple of perches here. Just be aware that when you're putting perches in, that you need to look at the size of your hens, because if you've got a hen perching, okay, enjoying a bit of sunshine or the weather or whatever, you've got one that comes in underneath. She's looking up. She can see the vent of the hen above. She might just have a little bit of a peck at it. So you either want the perches a little bit higher than she can reach, or a bit lower that she can't get in and spot that to start with. So, but that just depends on, the height of your hen, how tall they are and whatever. But lots of enrichment, lots of things. At the moment, I walk through the park with my dog every morning. There are hundreds of brown leaves on the ground from the trees. It's the time of the year, it's the autumn. And I just want to gather up those leaves and use them, put them in the run, scatter that 20 grams of mixed corn that Sarah's saying about, sprinkle that in there, let the hens get in there. They're going to really get to grips with that. And anything like that at all is brilliant. So lots of enrichment and lots of changing it around on a regular basis. Keep their interest, okay, and that is really going to help. All right, but let's have our fingers crossed that this year that if we go into a housing order like last year, it's not quite so long, but
yeah, absolutely.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed indeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think we're probably going to have to call it a day there. Anybody that's put questions in the Q&A box, we will be able to get back to you via email. Bear with us, we will do so. But other than that, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much, Alison, for your fountain of hen knowledge, and Sarah for your fountain of feeding knowledge on hens as well. It's been very interesting. There's lots of people saying that they've really enjoyed it, so that's fantastic. But for now, I shall say goodbye and end the webinar. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.